So you're playing Genshin, you do a 10 pull, and you get 5-star Navia. Now, what do you get with Navia besides America? Well, Navia is a Claymore-wielding Geo user who is a phenomenal main on-field damage dealer. And in this video, we're going to look at the basics of Navia. Now, Navia is a character that I binged relatively quickly after getting her. Why? I don't vibe with her, you know, I just don't. So put in the comments why I should. Now, before we get into how her kit works, I do want to say that the little golden swords rotating around her are not from her kit. They are from her weapon, which we will talk about later on. Just wanted to point that out. Now, her normal attacks are going to do physical damage. She's a Claymore wielder. She does have this kind of cool animation where she's going to pull out her umbrella or a gun umbrella. But other than that, they are pretty normal. And then her charge attack is going to be the Beyblade variant. Her kit is going to come into play with her skill. It all kind of rotates around her skill being her main source of damage. Now, whenever you use her skill, she's going to pull out her umbrella or her gunbrella, and you're going to use this to do an instance of geo damage to the enemy. That's kind of it on the surface level. Now, whenever you hold it, you do get the aiming mode. However, you will also absorb the crystallized shards that happen from the crystallize reaction between Geo and another element that is not Animo, Geo, or Dendro. Now, these shards are actually going to be very, very important because, as you see here with Navia, we have these little symbol on the side, right? I'm not going to say the name of the symbol, but you see the little symbols there. The more crystallized shards that you pick up, Navia or anybody in your team picks up, the more of these marks we're going to have. After we have 3, if we pick up another one, the first symbol is going to change. Once we have the larger, more prominent of the symbols for all 3, we are at full stack, so a maximum of 6 stacks. So whenever you use her skill, it is going to consume these stacks, dealing more damage the more stacks you have, up to 6 stacks. After you have used her skill, you will have a short period of Geo infusion into her normal attack. So if you have other elemental applicators on your team, like Farina or Fischl, or somebody that's going to be doing off-field application, then at this time, Navia's normal attacks with the Geo infusion, or conversion because it cannot be overridden, will be creating the Geo shards, right? Will allow you another chance to produce the crystallized reaction, allowing for Navia to consume them later on. We need to make sure that we are producing the crystallized reaction, the crystallized shards, to empower Navia, to get these stacks onto her, to make her skill stronger. Again, the skill is going to be her main source of damage, so we need this to hit the big number. So the first skill use, giving you the Geo infusion or conversion into your normal attacks, will allow for you to create more to then be able to do max stacks on the second use of the skill. You also notice that we have 2 charges on the skill, so we can use it twice before we have to worry about a cooldown. Now, her burst is going to do the America thing, and it is going to cause cannons to come on the screen, hitting enemy intermittently with Geo damage. Another great opportunity to create the Geo shards, but the burst will just give Navia these stacks periodically without having to cause the crystallize reaction. So you can produce a lot of stacks through her burst and through other elements to create the crystallize reaction, and you almost can absorb multiple of them to get full stacks for the first hit off the skill, use your Geo infused normal attacks to then get enough stacks to do the second skill while the burst is potentially still going on. So we can use her burst in conjunction with her skill and with Geo damage to be able to create a lot of crystallized reactions to get these crystallized shards. So we need to make sure that we have Navia in a team with off-field elemental applicators. In this team, I really have just Farina. Farina is going to be a phenomenal partner with Navia, but that's not a ton of elemental application, right? Especially if we're going up against an enemy that is neutral, that doesn't have an element on them, then Farina's minions aren't going to help produce a ton of these Geo crystallized shards. So in this team, taking Chiori out and put somebody else in like Xiangling can also be very, very good, but then you lose the Geo Resonance, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. So you do kind of have to have a good balance in this Navia team of Navia, another Geo character to also help produce some shards, but then off-field elemental applicators as well. Or having enough energy recharge on Navia to where you can use her burst to get the stacks to be the main source of where you get the stacks, or at least have it up more often to where it's easier to get the stacks. Then before we get into the artifacts and stuff, let's look at her passive. The first one is going to be where she gets her Geo conversion from. It's also going to give her a little bit of a buff on her normal and her charge attacks, but it's mainly going to be that Geo infusion or Geo conversion that is going to be great for producing more shards. Her second one is just going to increase her attack depending on each party member that you have with Navia, that is Pyro, Electro, Cryo, or Hydro. So in this team, Farina and Benny are the 2 because we can only stack it 2 times, giving her the double attack buff. Now, for artifacts in this video, I was running a 2-piece Glad, 2-piece Archaic Petra, which is going to actually be one of her best combinations if you don't have her best set, which is going to be Nighttime Whispers. This set is going to give her an attack increase, but it's also going to give her Geo damage bonus whenever you've used her skill, as well as giving another buff whenever you're under a shield created by the crystallized reaction. So this is going to be much more of the second time that you're going to use her skill is going to have a much higher damage ceiling than the first time, because after using your elemental skill, it's going to grant you the Geo damage bonus. So you need to make sure that you use the skill once to then get your stacks up and going with your burst and crystallized reactions and everything else. So that way your second use of the skill is going to be much, much higher. Another option that you do have is going to be Marshmallow Hunter, only if you're running her with Farina. She needs to have Farina in there to use Marshmallow Hunter. That's mainly going to be for the crit rate stack, not much of the normal and charge attack damage buff. Now for the main stats, you're mainly going to be running an Attack Sands, a Geo Goblet or Attack Goblet if you're like me and do not have a single good Geo Goblet, and then a crit rate or crit damage circlet. Now there is another kind of interesting thing that you can do with like Golden Troop, where you can either use like a 2-piece Golden Troop with 2-piece attack or 2-piece Archaic or whatever. But if you do have her kind of in a team with like Ning Wang, where you both, where Navia is going to take the field, use her skill, come right off, and then Ningyi is going to take the field, use her burst, use her charge attack, take her right back off, then you can kind of have this interesting swapping mechanic between Navia and Ningyi, where Golden Troop, 4-piece Golden Troop can actually work because it's going to increase her skill damage, and when they're not on the field, it's going to be increased even further. And you have 2 seconds upon taking the field to use her skill and get her right back off the field. So you can do something with Golden Troop if you're going to be using her with other characters that you want to swap around to them. Now for weapons, in this video, I was using Serpent Spine. Again, that is what those golden swords kind of rotating around Navia were. This is going to get up crit rate and is going to give her a damage buff through its passive as well. So this is a phenomenal option for Navia. This is a battle pass weapon though. You do have other options like Beacon of the Reach Sea, which is kind of good on just basically every Claymore user that there is. It's going to give a crit rate buff, and then it's going to give attack buffs after your elemental skill has hit the opponent. So this would work especially well with something like Nighttime Whispers, where your second skill is going to do a ton more damage. Then, of course, you do have something like Wolf's Gravestone if you've lost a 50-50. You even have the Cardboard Event Claymore from Fontaine that's going to get you energy recharge, which is great because it's going to allow Navia to use her burst enough to where you can reliably get those stacks. But in the passive, it's also going to give you an attack buff. So this is going to be a great weapon. If you don't have any of these, you can use Tidal Shadow, which is going to be an attack buff. And then upon being healed, it's going to give you another attack buff, which you're most likely going to be running Navia with Benny anyway, so you're going to have that healing to then activate Tidal Shadow, and because this weapon is craftable, it's very, very free to play friendly for her. I believe you can even use the Talking Stick, which is the other Battle Pass Claymore, but this one I think would require a very, very specific kind of team comp because of how the passive works, but I did just want to mention it in passing. Now Chiori is in this team for 2 reasons: to have some off-field Geo application, so that way we can have more crystallized reactions, but also because of Geo Resonance, which is going to do 2 major things. Characters protected by a shield will have the following special characteristics. Damage dealt is increased by 15%, which is great because we're going to be producing a lot of these crystallized reactions, so a lot of shields. But then dealing damage to enemies will decrease their Geo resistance by 20% for 15 seconds. This is one of the only ways to consistently and reliably shred Geo resistance off of your enemies. So I would say that Geo Resonance is a very important part of a Navia team. Now, like I said, Navia and Ningyi kind of have a really cool relationship between them, where you can use them, bring Navia on the field, use her skill, take her right back off, and go to Ningyi, to where Ningyi can kind of help produce a ton of these crystallized reactions, putting up her screen, so Navia can walk through and get an extra Geo damage bonus and the Geo Resonance. There's a great kind of synergy between those two, where you're going to be swapping between them very, very fast, right? You're going to kind of be setting up with Benny and with Farina, and then just swapping between Navia and Ningyi while building up the crystallized reaction, so that way Navia can take the field, do a ton of damage, go to Ningyi, use her skill, use her burst, use her skill again, charge attack if you have C6, all of that fun stuff, go back to Navia, walk through the screen, burst again to do just an absolutely absurd amount of damage with Navia. Now in this, I was using Chiori for the Geo Resonance, but also just because Chiori's off-field damage is really, really high, and Chiori's normal attacks can also be kind of infused with Geo, unless you're using C6 Benny, to produce a ton of Geo shards as well. Now that is going to be it for this video. Cookie has green hair, I have green hair, and I will see you in the next one.